Both come from cellulose. One was made by a tree in a forest over 30 years using sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. The other was made in a factory in Preston, Lancashire, through a process that required carbon disulfide, sodium hydroxide, and an industrial volume of fresh water, and produced an effluent stream that the local river was probably not ever designed to absorb. The same molecule, two completely different ways of getting there. I worked in that factory the summer I was 16. My father worked there for most of his career. The factory is gone now. Cheaper imports closed it down years ago. 40 years later, it's still the cleanest way I know to explain the question I want to put in front of you today. The question is, which set of design rules is your company actually running on? This episode is for the CEOs, the founders, the board chairs, and the principals of companies that make physical things, and for the design directors and sustainability leads working alongside them, who've been wondering, in the back of their minds, whether the work the company has been doing on sustainability is actually building the company what they want to be running 20 years from now. The short answer is, in most cases, no. Not because the people doing the work are not capable, they are. Not because the targets are not ambitious, they often are. But because the work itself is happening at one layer of the company and the layer underneath it has not changed. Let me tell you what I mean. Every company that makes physical things runs on a set of design rules. Most of those rules are never written down. They sit underneath the product brief, underneath the supplier contract, underneath the cost target, underneath the launch calendar. They're the rules that decide what counts as a good product, what counts as an efficient process, and what counts as an acceptable trade-off. These rules are an operating system. They were laid down across the Industrial Revolution, refined across the 20th century, and they describe with extraordinary precision how to make goods at scale cheaply, repeatedly, and on time. What they do not describe is how to make goods the planet can continue to underwrite. That part of the brief was never in the original specification. The sustainability movement, which I've been a part of for 40 years, has been trying to add it back in, after the fact, on top of an operating system that was never designed to receive it. This is what I mean when I say the work has been happening at one layer, while the layer underneath has not changed. The reports change, the targets change, the materials change at the margin, the packaging slims, the supply chain gets audited, and meanwhile, the design rules that decide what gets made, how long it lasts, and what happens at the end of its productive use, those rules are doing exactly what they were originally designed to do. And the result is what we're looking at today. 40 years of effort, real expense, genuine ambition, and a trajectory that is not bent in proportion to any of it. Not because the effort failed, but because the effort was being applied at the wrong layer. The question I've spent the last 20 years working on is what an operating system looks like that's designed from the start to make physical things the planet can continue to underwrite. Not as an add-on, not as a compliance overlay, but as the design rules themselves. I call the answer design like nature. It's 8 steps. They run from step 0, the question of what the company actually believes about its place in the living world, through step 7, which is the question of how a product comes back. The 8 steps are not a checklist. They're the operating instructions a company runs on when its design rules are aligned with how living systems actually produce persistent abundance, sustainably. I'm not going to walk through all 8 in this episode. We'll take them in turn over the coming weeks. But what I do want to put in front of you today is what the framework, when taken as a whole, produces and what it requires. What it produces is products that the company can stand behind for the full score, 20 years that they're in the world. 20 years, 40 years, long enough that the question of what happens at the end of the use is part of the design at the beginning of use, not an afterthought to be solved later by someone else. It produces processes that can be run continuously without drawing down the conditions that the company itself depends on to operate. It produces a balance sheet position that is structurally different from a competitor that is still operating on the old prior set of rules. And that last point is the one most CEOs I work with understand the fastest. A company running on design-like nature has costs, risks, and assets that look different on the books than a competitor running on the inherited industrial operating system. Not better marketing, different fundamentals. The kind of a difference that compounds across a score of years. What it requires is the part the existing sustainability function simply cannot deliver, no matter how good the people in it are. It requires a decision made at the level where the design rules are actually set, in order to change the rules, and that decision does not sit at the head of the sustainability level. It sits at the founder, CEO, board chair, or principal level, the same level at which the company's design rules were originally set. And it's the only level at which they can be changed. There's a score of years between today and the year 2046. That score is long enough to do real work. It's short enough to make starting now non-optional. The companies that will be in business at the other end of that score of years are the companies that use it to upgrade their operating system, not the companies that put more effort into the existing layer above. If you're watching this and you're responsible for a company that makes physical things, the conversation to have with yourself is not about your sustainability program. It's about which operating system your company is currently running on. The real question is this: if your design rules were the ones a tree used to make cellulose, instead of the ones a factory in Preston used, what would your company actually make? That question is the beginning of Design Like Nature. I'll see you next week.